when you log into JD Edwards, you'll get a home screen, which looks something like this. Well, it can look anything. This particular one is the standard project management page that comes from JD Edwards that is delivered with the software. And JD Edwards has, it's called a role-based page, a UX1 role-based page, and JD Edwards has 50 or 60 of these for all the different roles in the business. They have developed these standard pages. And you can see they're split into basically 3 areas. The first area down here is what's known as the alerts. So these are also called watch lists in JD Edwards. And these alert you to whatever's happening in your business. For example, here you can see there are 7 pieces of equipment that are currently down. There are no contractor logs that are due to expire, for example, and so on. So these are the alerts. And from here, if you click on an alert, it takes you directly into the detail to show you what makes up that the detail of that particular alert. So that's on the left here are the alerts. I must right up front please apologize for the response. This is, remember, a demo system. It's an internal system. The resources behind this are very, very low. The middle is what is known as the analyze. So here we've got the various graphs showing various things. Here is a % complete by job. And if I wanted to see what makes up the detail that makes up this graph, I simply click on the % complete, and it shows me the detailed jobs so I can see what is making up the graph, the data that is behind the graph. And then on the right, I've got what is known as the act, and this is actually takes you into the applications so that you can do your job, be it enter a journal or review accounts payable or whatever the case is, manage your jobs and so on. So that is the alert, analyze, and act. And these are standard pages that come delivered with JD Edwards. I don't know a single customer who takes them and uses them as is. Everybody customizes them to make them into their own. When I say customize, I mean configure, because there's no customization as such here. It's all configuration. And so what I've done is I have set up a project called Merry and Mirth, and I have taken that particular project management page and I have configured it to suit my requirements. This one I have configured to suit what I want to do in this demonstration. Again, this is not going to be what yours would look like. Yours would be configured to suit your job or what you need to do within JD Edwards. So I just want to, well, right. So that is one way that we navigate through the JD Edwards screens, is via these what are known as E1 pages, okay, or landing pages. Another way that we navigate through JD Edwards is via menus. So your standard menu structure here. And you can see here are all the modules that I've been talking about. Here's change management, there's service billing and contract billing. Here are the localizations. So we've got EMEA localizations for Asia, etc., etc. So localizations for specific countries, etc. So everything that you're looking for can also be found on these menus. And we can take them easily from these menus onto our specific pages. Okay, so that's just the basic navigation and how the menu structure works within JD Edwards. And you can completely set it up according to what you need. And for each individual person, it can be set up differently, of course. Okay. So let's go and take a look now at some of the stuff. So first thing I'm going to show you is supplier master information. One of the backbones of JD Edwards is the address book. Everything has an address. So your suppliers, your customers, your departments, your companies, your employees, everybody has an address and it's managed in the address book. For the purpose of this exercise, I have got the supplier master. Now, if I show you the standard layout, which is no layout, in fact, okay, we have the supplier master here, and from here, I can drill down using row exits, or just right click on it, and I can drill down into detail, for example, into the address book, okay, and so on. But what I've done is I've created, and everything that I'm showing you, when I tell you I've created it specifically for this demonstration, I have done it on the glass. Nothing is a modification or a customization. It is all configurable. It's all configuration. I'm not a techie person, and I have done this all myself. So just to let you know that this is purely configuration. So I have set up this layout called Mary and Merv, and it's called a Cafe One screen, but basically what I've done is I've melded 3 screens together so that I can see for the specific line that I'm on additional details. So here I can see some detail on the address book and some additional detail on the supplier master. Obviously, in the real world, you wouldn't be looking at this only. You would have far more information than what I've got here, but it gives you an idea of what we can do. So we'll notice here that Legal Eagles is suspended. Okay, that because this tick is indicated here, it is suspended. And what I've done, I'll just close out of that. If I go to enter a subcontract, okay, what I'm going to do here is as soon as I click OK on the enter here, it's going to trigger one of those orchestrations that I was talking about, which will go and check to see whether this supplier is suspended or not. If they are suspended, it will send me a message. And if they are not suspended, it will then progress effectively approve the order, the subcontract, and it will send a notification to say that the subcontract has been approved. So that's where we're headed with this. Let me go and add a subcontract so that you can see. So here I'm entering the supplier, and I can't remember because I don't know his name, so I simply enter legal, and I get a list of all the suppliers that start with legal. Legal Eagle is who I want to work with, and I'm going to ship it to this particular job. I can remember the job number. If I could not, I could do the same thing there. I could go and find the job number or use this search here to find the job number that I want to use. Okay, and then I'll enter an account number. Now, at this stage, I'm entering the account number that I want this particular legal expense to be posted against. There are ways, very simple ways in JD Edwards to make that automatic based on the supplier, perhaps based on a combination of the supplier and the job, based on various things, category codes and so on, that we can automate that account number, and you don't need to actually enter it. But for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to enter it. Call this legal fees, and I'm going to give it a cost. Let's say it's $19,500. And let's click OK. Now you see what it's done here. It said the order amount is above the order maximum. If I go back to, I'm going to leave this open just for a moment, and I'm going to click on home over here so that I can go back into that supplier, and you will see that Legal Eagles has a maximum order value of 10,000. So because I entered a contract of more than 10,000, it said, wait a minute, it's over the minimum. At this stage, I've got that only as a warning, so I can say, oh, that's all right, I've got authority to do this, or maybe I'll send it for an additional approval or whatever the case is, but I'm happy, so I can just click OK again. Now I come to the logs here when I'm entering a of course, there's a lot more you can enter on a contract, right? I'm just entering the bare minimum for the purposes of this exercise. There's a lot more you can enter. And what I want to show you here is that you can deal with all your logs, your submittals, your transmittals, and anything else that you need to deal with on a contract. You can work with them here. So, for example, this might be a certificate of currency that is needed, okay? And we say it is required perhaps by the 31st of the 10th, 23, so the end of the month. And at the moment, we don't have it, so the status might be no. And the pay effect might be yes. In other words, I want to be warned. If I enter an invoice for this guy, I want to be warned by the fact that I don't yet have a certificate of currency. So I want to know that, okay? So I'll just enter that log, and we'll take a further look at them later on. Right, now because I have entered that order now, let me just close out of here and go back home. I'll just close a few of my screens. I should have a message here in the message center because it should have triggered the orchestration, and that orchestration has triggered a message that says that my subcontract is not approved. And it says subcontract number 6365 has been rejected because that vendor is not an approved vendor. I also have a link here and also over there, same link, to go into the subcontract detail. I could put a link, any link I like. I could put multiple links, but I've just put one link in saying, show me the subcontract. And maybe here I want to cancel it, or maybe I want to adjust it, or whatever the case is, depending on the requirement. Now, if we were to go into the supplier master and just remove that suspend flag, so I'm removed it. If I click find now, this suspend is now no on this legal eagle. And I can go and enter, let me just enter another one for simplicity's sake. I'll just enter another. And I'll enter it quickly because I know all the numbers, because I've been practicing this behind the scenes. I didn't just start this today, as you might appreciate. Okay, legal fees. And I'll put in an extended cost of $9,000 this time. And then it's also not going to stop. Notice it didn't warn me about me going over the maximum because it's less than $10,000 this time. I'm again going to add a submittal of a certificate of currency. And I'm going to say it hasn't been given to me yet. This one I'm not worried about maybe, and I need it by the 31st of the 10th. From a payment point of view, I'm not worried about it. Okay, and he's now been entered. 6373 is his number. Now, this guy does not, won't send a message, but what it will do is it sends me an email. And that email says this subcontract has been approved. So whoever needs the email can get it. I have subscribed to this notification and asked it to email me. So it's emailed me saying that the subcontract has been approved. There's the contract number, blah, blah, blah. And if I click on the details, it can take me in. I need to sign in, of course. When you click from the email, you need to sign in again. When you click from within JD Edwards, obviously you do not need to sign in. And JD Edwards, of course, can be configured to single sign-on, which means you won't have to sign in. Okay, and it can bring me into the contract now, and I can continue processing with it. Okay, once you come out of the my problem is that, of course, I've hidden that with I've hidden the line up here, so I can't actually exit it, which is what's giving me the trouble. Okay, once I have as you saw, when I went from the email into JDE, it only goes into that application to nothing else. And once I exit out of that application, I exit out completely. I can't actually then move around in JD Edwards. Of course, that's from security purposes. We don't want people moving around after they've come in from an email. But that particular message also came as a notification here in this notification list, also shown here up on this bell up at the top. So you can see that there's a notification. Something has happened that needs me to look at it within JD Edwards. So I can get an email, I can have it shown here. It doesn't matter. It's entirely my choice. I chose this time to have it shown both places. Send me an email and show me here that something has happened. And it's exactly the same as the email. It says the subcontract has been approved. And if I click on order details, it will take me into that order. So that orchestration I set up in here. And basically what it's doing, this is an orchestration, has just a few steps in it. And you'll see this Orchestrator Studio, it's very intuitive, very easy to use, was to check the vendor. And what it's doing is it got the order details that I sent it. It checked the vendor status. And if the vendor status, if it was approved, then it went off and approved the subcontract order. Okay, so we approved the subcontract if the vendor was not suspended, approved the subcontract, and sent that notification to say that the subcontract has been approved. Similarly, if it was suspended, it came by this path and sent a message to say that the vendor's not approved. So that's really how that fitted together. And simply to get it onto the to get it to work, I simply attached that particular orchestration via what is known as the Form Extension Manager. I associated this orchestration, I'll go and edit it to see, with this OK button up here. I said, once the button is clicked, execute this orchestration. And it sent through the order number so that it knew what it needed to do next. Okay, so it's as simple as that. And this is all, as I say, on the glass. I did it quickly and easily in order to set up this demonstration. So that's how you can build additional interfaces, automation into JD Edwards as well as with the current with the existing functionality. Now that orchestration, as you saw, actually just called our own supplier master to go and check the address book, to go and check that suspended flag. It could just as easily have been a REST API out to, for example, a vendor management system, and get information back from a vendor management system and then continue the process. So I've used just our supplier master for simplicity's sake, but to set up a RESTful API within the orchestrator is just as simple, or a call to a RESTful API is just as simple, if that is the way that you want to go. Okay. So now I've entered that I'm going to find a contract here. Let's pick up this contract. We're going to make a progress payment on this contract, for example. Okay. And I can enter the invoice number. And remember, whatever I enter on this screen, you can also send via an external system, via a spreadsheet, load via a spreadsheet. Okay, whatever I enter, we can also load automatically. If that is an option, if you've got the information coming from a different system, coming from an Excel spreadsheet or whatever the case is, we can load it in, either from an orchestration, or if you notice these buttons here, this is an import grid data. I can import it. I can copy and paste into here. Okay, so there are many options for getting the information in rather than typing it in. For me, at this stage, I'm going to type it in, okay, just for convenience sake, for demonstration purposes, and also because I want to show you a few things, like this type of payment. When I'm making progress payments, I can do an incremental payment. So if I were to leave this type of payment blank, it would take the amount that I put in the current payment and it would simply pay that. Or I can do a cumulative percentage, in which case I can say I am 30% on in my project, and therefore I will pay 30% of this contract. If I've already paid 20%, then this invoice will be for another 10%. Does that make sense? And then, of course, I can also put in a cumulative amount here, which says 2, which says that the current payment will be entered as the amount. Oh, sorry. Oh, yes, the current payment will be entered as the amount. So it will take what's paid before and subtract it from what I say the current payment is, and it will pay the difference. For the purpose of this exercise, I'm simply going to say that I want to say that this project is now 50% complete. And I click OK, and away it goes. Now, if I were to pick, let me pick a different one. I think I would like to pick this one. Okay. Again, this is a warning saying that it's a duplicate invoice number. I can accept it, or I can. Okay. I wanted to pick one where there was a. Let me find one. I'm going to click on home. Just don't mind me going around in circles. And I'm going to go to this manage submittals over here, because I want to specifically pick one that has a pay effect of Y. So the status code is no on the 6322. That's not a good one because I think he's already finished. Let's take the 6349. The status code is no and the pay effect is Y on the submittal. So we don't yet have a certificate of currency, and we've told it that if we're going to create an invoice, we want to know about it. So that's 6349. I'll go back to I'll go back to the contracts. Okay, and let's take 6349. I'm going to try and pay him. Okay, I'll pick up the order line that I'm dealing with. You see what it does. It says there's an outstanding submittal warning. So it says there is a submittal. There are outstanding submittals. Tangle my tongue again. There are outstanding submittals attached to this contract, or there are outstanding submittals attached to the contract, and the required date or expired date is prior to the system date. So it's just warning you that actually there's a submittal here. Maybe you want to go and check it. Okay, so if I now go, I won't bother with this one now. Okay, I can now go down to that. No, coming out of the I want to go back to the logs. So I can go and look at that log and I can now update it and say, well, actually, he has now provided me with the certificate of currency. I'm happy with that, but I would like to load the certificate of currency as well. So I can go to this line attachments over here. Now, this attachment story is on just about any transaction in JD Edwards. You can attach documentation, be it a journal, be it an invoice, be it as a contract, be it a purchase order, be it a lease, be it an item, a piece of equipment, a bill of materials, whatever, you can attach documents to it. And the documents you can attach can be files or they can be text. So the text one, quite obviously, you just type in and say, Joe, like, for example, the text attachment is one that's often used in credit control because Joe so upset that the check was in the mail. That was last week. This week he says, oh dear, the check came back, had the wrong address. You get the idea. That's the text one. Or you can have a file or a URL. In this case, I'm going to attach a file. So I'm going to choose the file. Or you can just drag and drop. I'm just going to choose it, and I'm going to choose the certificate of currency, and I'll click save, and here it is, the certificate of currency. So now it's loaded in here, and you'll see that on the log revisions or the submittals, I have an attachment, a little paper clip here showing me that there is in fact an attachment here. So I've now got the certificate of currency attached to this log, as well as you could also include, for example, an issue date and various other information. If I click on that attachment, I can then go and download it. I want to have a good look at it. You can see I downloaded one earlier. Oh, what I've done there. Oh, I zipped it by mistake. That's not really what I wanted to do, but that's okay. Here's my, I've gone all over the show, except, it's because it's showing on the other screen. Here is my certificate of currency that I loaded into there. Okay. So as I say, those attachments, they are available all over the place. You will also notice all over the place in JD Edwards these category codes. So those category codes are reporting codes, and you can define them as you want. And there are 3 here on the logs, but there are 50 on business units or cost centers, jobs. There are another, I don't know, 43, I think, on individual accounts. So there are plenty of ways to categorize your objects or your items for reporting purposes. Okay. While we are on the story of payments and so on, I will take you in to show you in accounts payable what has happened. So in accounts payable, you will see that in the standard voucher entry, well, in the inquiry standard voucher, let me look at Legal Eagle. I think that was the supplier that we were using. And we can see here are, here's the latest progress payment that we made. Okay. You can see the invoice date is today. That is the latest progress payment that we made, invoice number 23. And as I mentioned, this can be imported rather than by various methods rather than entered. The progress payments can also be made in the same way. Okay. Is there anything else I wanted to show you here? Oh, While we are on accounts payable, let's play around with the expense management quickly. So what I've got here behind the scenes is a little CSV that has some claims, expense claims in it. Okay, so there's one expense claim with 3 lines in it and another expense claim with 3 lines in it for 2 different people, one for me and one for Ben Long. Right? So this could just as easily be, as opposed to a CSV or an Excel spreadsheet, it could just as easily be interfacing from something like Concur or any other expense management system. Okay, and what I've got is I've got an orchestration that I've put onto the screen here, and if I click that button, it's going to run it. It says, oh, I see I need a file for input. So I'll just go and fetch that file. And click OK, and it runs. I can run it in the background. I chose to run this interactively. And here you can see that it says it's executed. And for those techie people around, it even gives you all the output here if you want to see exactly what happened. Okay, as much or as little output as you have provided in the orchestration itself. Now, if I go and take a look at a view of the expenses, I can see that here it has loaded those expenses over here. There they are, ready to be paid. Also, it has sent me, because I am one of those people who was on that list, it sent me an email to say your expense claim has been processed and it'll be paid into your account within 7 days. Whatever the case is, you can have whatever you like in that email. Okay. So that was also another orchestration that I used to do that, to load that information in. It loads it in. It also posts the invoices, so they're all ready for payment now. It could be that it actually loads them in and it does not. They're not ready for payment. Maybe they are held waiting for some sort of approval. And so maybe what we trigger from this orchestration, once we've loaded it, it's simple enough. Instead of triggering a message, we might trigger a workflow that sends the claims to somebody to say, we've loaded these claims, please approve them. And they approve them, it can update the status, and then create the invoices and send the email to the relevant person. I'm sure you get the idea of what is possible in using the Orchestrator or the robotic process automation tool that we have there. Right, let's take a look. I'm just going to bring this out over here. So you see that there's a little button here. So every one of these little widget things, I can pop out if I want to see them and make my screen bigger, or, you know, get rid of all the noise around if I wanted to, just to show you that. Okay, let's take a look now at effectively job costing. So there is more to project management than job costing, but job costing is where I've concentrated my efforts for this particular presentation. So I've set up a job or a project called Merry and Mirth Upgrade Project. And I have set up underneath it 3 different jobs, the Merry Road upgrade and the Mirth Bridge construction, bridge construction at least, and then Celebration Parklands. And for each of those, I have got various information that that I have provided. So I've provided very basic information for these things, but there is place to provide a lot of information. So here I've said I've got perhaps it's a joint venture, and this is the parent business unit or the project under which this job falls. Okay, there's the project that actually there's the project, and here's if it's a joint venture, the parent business unit. I've got, of course, a description, various description lines, and if there's not enough detail here for the description, not enough space to put in a big description, I can, of course, add an attachment as I spoke earlier. I could add a text attachment here that says this project is the best project ever and will be the first one to come in under budget, under time, and under I don't know, whatever. You can make it up as you go along, okay? And you can set up there's the text attachment. Now that text attachment, if you use Reports Now, which is the reporting tool that Andrew mentioned, can be, when you print reports and things, that can also be printed with the with any information on this job or project. I mentioned that JD Edwards loves their category codes. Here are 50 category codes that we can use within JD Edwards to categorize things. So let's say, first of all, we want to know which area the category code is in. Let's say what division it is. Okay, so it's maybe, I don't know, what division. They're called cat code 1, 20, 21, 40. They're not very meaningful names, but luckily JD Edwards gives you the ability to configure these names. So for example, let's say that because this is all, it depends on what you need as to what we put in here. It's completely up to you what is needed. So let's say we want to use this first address to identify the project manager. You'll notice if you click on this little visual assist over here that all addresses are available to me here, and maybe I want to look only at employees at this stage and pick a specific employee. Maybe Annette Walters is going to be the project manager for this particular part of the project. But address number 1 means nothing to anybody. So what I can do here is I can go again into my form extension, and I can go down to that, across to that address book number, and I can say, well, actually, I want to rename you and I want to call you project manager. Maybe the second address is the project sponsor, for example, and maybe I don't use the other addresses, so I can just get rid of them. Let me just remove them here. They're not really being deleted, they are only hidden. And if I were to come down here, I could find them again and put them back if I wanted to, okay? But for this case, I've gotten rid of them. I can also move fields around here, so I can, you know, let's say, yeah, I can move fields around. So I actually want this equipment rate code to be over here, for example. I can just move it around like that, okay, and take away what I don't want. So you can get rid of all the noise. You can name the fields the way you want to see them. You can structure the screen the way you want to see it. All of that sort of thing can be done. I'm just going to do that for the moment, and I'm going to close here. So that is done for the application, the whole application. The job cost master revisions now will show project manager and project sponsor for everybody, okay? But what I can also do is I can also personalize the form and say, well, actually, I know that I've got the project manager and the project sponsor here, but if accounts payable is the person that's looking at it, maybe they want to call this, they want to let's call it, maybe he's the approver, the main approver, for example. Okay, so he's got a separate name. And I can set that up as the accounts payable form. Now, when that personal form is sitting as AP, it says approver. When it's not sitting as AP, it says project manager. So not only can I set it up company-wide for everybody, but for specific roles, for specific people, for specific uses, I can change the names accordingly and restructure the screen accordingly. So it's very, very flexible in that way. Okay. And it's all, as you see on the glass, there's no customization or modification. It's all effectively like the configuration stuff. You don't have to do it. You can leave JD Edwards just the way it is. It will work perfectly fine because behind the scenes, everything is still working exactly the same. But you can configure it how you want it to be configured. The other thing I want to show you here is some budgets. So in this case, I've loaded some budgets here. The original budget's been loaded into these specific accounts. Now you will see that these are at level 8. So your chart is hierarchical because it rolls up and the job chart rolls up into each other. You don't have to budget at this low level. You can budget at the higher level. So for example, you might budget only at legal and consultation level rather than at the individual account level. That is your choice. Okay, so you can choose the level at which you want to budget. I've got an original budget here. I just typed these in, but the same way as we brought in the expenses, the same way as I've spoken about bringing in other invoices or bringing in even your contracts or your log details, your submittals and transmittals, all the same way, we can either copy and paste the budgets in or interface to an external, to your external budget and forecasting system, or interface to bring it in from a spreadsheet. Doesn't matter. You know, however you need to load it, we can load it. And it certainly does not need to be a manual exercise the way that I am showing you here. I can also then go to the budgets and I can do budget revisions. So here I can add or subtract. This is the current amount of the budget. Okay, and let's take this 35,000 for 35 million, for example, and I'll say, actually, I'm going to add an amount. I'm not working with units in this case. I'm going to add another million, which will bring me to a total of 36 million. Okay, or I could put in the cumulative amount and it would work out what the adjustment is. Either way, whatever I like, I can adjust the revise the budgets and in that way. I can also do the same with forecasts, okay? And I can also import the forecasts and the budgets as I mentioned before. Right. So that's really what I wanted to show you on that. There's a lot more on the job cost on the master that you can set up for your projects, but that is effectively the bare minimum one would really set up, okay, at this stage. Let's go and see the information that you would look at. So if I go into the job status inquiry, this is one of my favorite screens of all times. I love this screen because I just love the way it works. So here I am looking at project number, my project number, job number 2500. I'm looking at that because I set up a query here, and this query says only look where the project number is 2000. That's the only thing I'm looking at. If I looked at all records, I would see something completely different. You'll see that I see all sorts of other jobs that I'm not interested in for this presentation, and that's why I set up a query for this presentation. So here's this query, and I can see here that actually for engineering consultants, for example, I have an original budget of 25,000. I've got a revised, oh, here's my 35 and 36 down at the bottom. sorry, here on this build here, 35,000 is the original budget. And remember, I added $1 million to it. So I've now got a revised budget of 36. So I've got the original and the revised if I want. Okay. And I can see that there's a little bit completed here, not very much, 2%. As it works through, it will update that percentage. You can override that percentage if you want to as well. If it doesn't have to be what the system calculates. But if I look over here, for example, I have got an actual amount of $3,100. So that's actual spend. And here's my commitments over here. But you know what's missing from this screen is my estimate at completion, for example. Okay, so what I can do, if you look over here, there's a thing called columns. And these columns here are there because I've told it to put them in here. I can add another column from here, and there are various standard columns I can add, like estimate at completion, which is the one I'm going to use, or budget variance, or whatever the case is. I can add those columns in, but I can also define my own columns and give a calculation of what I want to see in that column. And one of the things that I would do if I set up change management for variations is I would define the columns to show the variations on here as well. But what I've done is I've included this estimate at completion, and you can see the column over here. And now if I hit find, I have the estimate at completion. So this one is still running on track. Okay. But this one, there's no budget on it, so it's added the open and the actuals together to come up with my estimate at completion, for example. From here, I can drill down. If I go back to here, I'll just go to the list version here. From here, I can drill down into the details. So let's say for this engineering consultant account, I want to see what makes up those actuals. If I right click on it and I go to the account ledger, here is the list making up the $3,100. Simple as that. One purchase or one invoice or voucher and one journal entry over there. Similarly, if I right click and I go to commitment inquiry, here I can see that the amount originally committed was 17,000. 600 has been relieved, so we've already made a payment on this particular, or generated an invoice against this particular line on the order, and therefore the balance is 16,400. So each of these figures, we can go and check the detail behind the scenes. Okay, so you can see all the detail that you need to see here. Also from the screen, dun, 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 dun. Are you watching? Form, payroll ad hoc, time entry by employee. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, so here you can enter the time by the employee, and you can enter what type of pay it is, be it leave, be it overtime, whatever the case is. Okay. And you can enter whether it's back pay, all sorts of information you can enter here, the number of hours, the rate will come from what is set up for this employee, okay, or you can override the amount, which is what I did over here, and you can set up all sorts of information in here based on how the employee is set up. Basically, I've just set up a quick one that says, right, I've worked this week, and I worked on, where did I say that I want you to post it to that account. Okay. Now, as I mentioned before, you can import, you can use this import grid to import this from another, an Excel spreadsheet or something like that. Okay. You can actually copy from the Excel spreadsheet and paste it in here. You just simply Control C, Control V, copy and paste, and in it goes. Okay. Or If you have another time entry system, maybe you have a time card system, whatever the case is, you can interface it using that orchestrator that I keep mentioning. You can use that to interface straight into here to upload your time entry. Okay.